Elvis was halfway through "Can't Help Falling in Love" when a man broke through security and rushed onto the stage. The man wasn't a crazed fan. He wasn't drunk. He was a father, and he was furious. Elvis stopped singing mid-verse as the man grabbed a microphone stand and shouted into it, with a voice shaking with rage and desperation. "You're destroying my daughter. She's throwing her life away because of you." The entire arena fell silent. 20,000 people froze. Security guards rushed forward to tackle the man, but Elvis held up his hand to stop them. What happened in the next 15 minutes would become one of the most powerful moments in Elvis Presley's career. A moment that proved he wasn't just the king of rock and roll, but a man who understood the human heart better than anyone realized. It was October 14th, 1972, at the Chicago Stadium. The place was packed wall to wall with screaming fans who had waited months for this night. Elvis was in the middle of one of his most successful tours, performing to sold-out crowds across America. The energy in the building had been electric from the moment he stepped on stage. He'd already torn through Burning Love, Suspicious Minds, and Jailhouse Rock, working the crowd into a frenzy with his signature moves and that voice that could make grown women cry and strong men feel things they didn't know how to name. But now, an hour into the show, Elvis had transitioned into the softer, more intimate part of his performance. This was the moment in every Elvis concert where the spectacle melted away and something deeper took over. The lights had dimmed from bright white to warm amber. The screaming had softened to a reverent hum. People sat down, holding hands, swaying gently. Elvis had walked to center stage with just an acoustic guitar, stripped of the elaborate jumpsuit theatrics, wearing a simple black shirt and looking more like a man than a legend. He had started playing the opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love," the song that had become his signature ballad, the song that captured everything tender and vulnerable about Elvis Presley, beneath all the fame and flash. His voice, usually powerful and commanding, had softened into something almost fragile. This was the Elvis that his mother had known, the Elvis who sang gospel songs in church as a boy, the Elvis who understood that music wasn't just about performance, it was about connection, about reaching into someone's chest and touching their heart directly. The audience was mesmerized. 20,000 people hanging on every note, every breath. Parents held their children. Couples leaned into each other. Young girls in the front rows had tears streaming down their faces, not from hysteria, but from pure emotion. This was the magic of Elvis. He could fill a massive arena and still make every single person feel like he was singing directly to them. But then, midway through the second verse, something happened that shattered the moment completely. From the left side of the stage, past the security barriers, past the guards who were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of thing, a man came running. He wasn't young. He appeared to be in his late 40s, wearing a working man's clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt, his face red with exertion and emotion. He moved with the desperate urgency of someone who had been holding something inside for too long and couldn't contain it anymore. Security guards immediately started moving toward him, their hands reaching for their radios, calling for backup. But the man was fast, driven by something more powerful than fear of consequences. He grabbed one of the unused microphone stands at the side of the stage and dragged it to center, positioning himself just feet away from Elvis. Elvis stopped singing. His fingers froze on the guitar strings. For a moment, he just stared at this man who had invaded his stage, trying to assess whether he was dangerous, whether this was a threat, or something else entirely. The man was breathing hard, his chest heaving, and when he spoke into the microphone, his voice carried clearly through the arena's sound system, cutting through the shocked silence like a knife. "You're destroying my daughter," the man shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's 16 years old, and she's throwing her entire life away because of you." The audience gasped. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Security guards were now on stage, surrounding the man, ready to drag him away. But Elvis, in a move that surprised everyone, held up his hand. "Wait," Elvis said, his voice calm but firm. "Let him speak." The security guards hesitated, looking at each other, uncertain. Elvis Presley was their boss, and if he wanted this man to speak, they would let him speak, even though every instinct told them this was dangerous, that this situation could escalate, that they needed to remove the intruder immediately. Elvis set down his guitar carefully and walked closer to the man. Not threatening, not aggressive, just walking like a person approaching another person who was in pain. "Sir," Elvis said quietly, "what's your name?" The man looked at Elvis, and up close, you could see that his anger was mixed with something else. Desperation. Fear. The look of a parent who was watching their child slip away and didn't know how to stop it. "Robert," the man said, his voice slightly quieter now but still audible through the microphone. "Robert Mitchell. And my daughter is down there." He pointed into the audience toward the front rows. "Sarah Mitchell. She's 16 years old, and you've ruined her life." The audience was completely silent now. You could hear people breathing. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone in that arena understood they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that had never happened at an Elvis concert before. Elvis looked out into the crowd, trying to locate the girl Robert was pointing at. Then he turned back to Robert, his expression serious but not defensive. "Tell me what's happening," Elvis said simply. Robert's composure broke. The anger that had fueled his rush onto the stage began to crack, revealing the fear and heartbreak underneath. "She won't go to school anymore," Robert said, his voice shaking. "All she does is listen to your music. All she talks about is you. She's failing her classes. She wants to drop out and move to Memphis. She says school doesn't matter because she's going to marry you." His voice broke completely on those last words. She's 16 years old, and she thinks her real life is waiting for her in some fantasy world, where she ends up with Elvis Presley. I can't reach her anymore. I've lost my daughter, and it's because of you. The accusation hung in the air. 20,000 people held their breath, waiting to see how Elvis would respond. This wasn't a heckler. This wasn't a drunk causing trouble. This was a father in pain, a parent who had somehow come to believe that Elvis Presley was responsible for destroying his family. Elvis stood there for a long moment, just looking at Robert. Then he did something unexpected. He walked over to the piano bench at the side of the stage, sat down, and gestured for Robert to sit next to him. "Come here," Elvis said gently. "Sit with me for a minute." Robert, looking confused, but too emotionally exhausted to resist, walked over and sat down beside Elvis. The two men, the father and the king of rock and roll, sat together on stage in front of 20,000 people. But what happened next stunned everyone. Elvis turned to face Robert directly, ignoring the massive audience completely, speaking to him as if they were alone in a room. "Robert," Elvis said, his voice low and sincere, "I need to tell you something. I'm not your enemy. I understand why you're angry, but I'm not the problem here." "You're the one she's obsessed with," Robert said, his voice bitter. "No," Elvis said firmly. "I'm the excuse. I'm the face she's putting on something deeper. Your daughter isn't running toward me. She's running away from something else. And until you figure out what that is, nothing's going to change." Robert looked at Elvis, confusion and pain written across his face. "When I was young," Elvis continued, "younger than your daughter, I felt like nobody saw me. Nobody understood me. And I found something, music, that made me feel less alone, that made me feel like maybe there was a place in the world where I belonged. Your daughter isn't in love with me. She's in love with the idea that somewhere out there, life can be bigger and more beautiful than what she's experiencing right now." Elvis paused, letting his word sink in. "The question you need to ask isn't how do I stop her from loving Elvis Presley. The question is, why doesn't my daughter believe her real life is worth living?" The arena was dead silent. People in the front rows were crying. Even the security guards looked moved by what they were hearing. Robert's face crumpled. "I don't know how to talk to her anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything I say is wrong. Every rule I make, she breaks. I'm losing her, and I don't know how to stop it." "You can't stop it," Elvis said gently. "She's 16. She's supposed to be pulling away from you. That's her job. Your job isn't to hold on tighter. It's to make sure she knows you'll be there when she needs to come back." Elvis stood up and walked to the front of the stage, looking out into the audience. "Sarah Mitchell," Elvis called out. "Where are you, sweetheart?" There was movement in the third row. A teenage girl with long, dark hair slowly stood up. Even from the stage, you could see she was mortified, her face bright red, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Come up here, Sarah," Elvis said, his voice kind. "It's okay. You're not in trouble." Security helped Sarah climb onto the stage. She walked slowly, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like she might die of embarrassment at any moment. When she reached the center of the stage, she couldn't look at her father, or at Elvis. She just stared at the floor. Elvis walked over to her and spoke quietly, but his microphone picked up every word. "Sarah, look at me," he said gently. She raised her eyes, and when she saw Elvis standing right in front of her, fresh tears spilled down her face. "Is it true?" Elvis asked. "Are you failing school?" Sarah nodded miserably. "Is it true you want to drop out?" Another nod. "Why?" Elvis asked simply. Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Because school is boring. Because nobody there understands me. Because I just want my life to start." Elvis smiled sadly. "Sweetheart, your life has already started. This is it. This is your life, right now. And if you throw away your education, if you run away from the hard things, you're not going to end up living some magical life. You're going to end up trapped and limited and wishing you'd made different choices." He gestured to her father, who was still sitting at the piano, watching this exchange with an expression of desperate hope. "That man right there," Elvis said, "he's not trying to control you. He's trying to protect you. And I know it doesn't feel like it. But one day, you're going to understand that the people who love you enough to set boundaries are the ones who care the most." But Elvis wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire arena now, his voice growing stronger, more passionate. "How many of you out there are young people who think your parents don't understand you?" Elvis called out. Thousands of hands went up. Thousands of voices shouted in agreement. "And how many of you are parents who are scared to death that you're losing your kids?" More hands, more voices. The arena was responding to him now, engaged in this moment that had become something bigger than a concert, bigger than entertainment. "Here's what I want everyone to understand," Elvis said. "I sing love songs. I make music about dreams and romance and all the beautiful things in life. But you know what? The real love, the love that matters, isn't the love between a teenage girl and some singer she's never met. The real love is between a father and daughter, between a parent who stays up at night worrying and a child who's trying to figure out who they are." He walked over to Robert and put his hand on the man's shoulder. "This man loves his daughter so much that he broke onto my stage in front of 20,000 people. That's not control. That's courage. That's love. Then Elvis turned to Sarah. And this girl is trying to find herself in a world that feels too small. That's not rebellion. That's growth. That's life. Elvis gestured for Robert to stand up and walk over to Sarah. The father and daughter stood facing each other on stage, both crying, both looking lost and hurt and desperate for connection. "Robert," Elvis said, "tell your daughter what you're really feeling. Not the anger, not the rules. Tell her what's in your heart." Robert looked at Sarah, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm scared," he said. "I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared that you'll make mistakes I can't protect you from. I'm scared that one day you'll need me and I won't know how to help. And I'm scared that you don't know how much I love you." Sarah's face crumpled. She took a step toward her father. "Daddy," she whispered, "I'm scared too." And then she was in his arms, and they were both sobbing, holding each other in the middle of Elvis's stage while 20,000 people watched and wept with them. And that's when everything changed. The audience erupted, not with screams or cheers, but with that slow, respectful applause that comes when people are witnessing something sacred. Parents in the crowd were holding their own children tighter. Teenagers were looking at their parents with new understanding. Something had shifted in that arena, something profound and true. Elvis let them have their moment. He didn't rush them. He didn't try to reclaim the spotlight. He just stood there, quietly, letting this father and daughter heal something that had been broken. Finally, after what felt like minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds, Robert pulled back and looked at Elvis. "Thank you," he said simply. Elvis shook his hand. "Take care of each other," he said. Then he looked at Sarah. "And you, young lady, you finish school. You hear me? You can still dream about music and beautiful things, but you build yourself a foundation first. You make yourself strong and smart and capable. Then you chase your dreams from a place of strength, not desperation." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I will. I promise." Elvis smiled. "Good. Now, I'm going to finish this concert, and you two are going to sit right there in the front row, and you're going to hold hands and remember that you have each other, because that's worth more than any concert, any song, or any dream. Family is the real treasure." Security helped Robert and Sarah back to their seats. The crowd gave them a standing ovation as they climbed down from the stage, Sarah holding her father's hand tightly. Elvis picked up his guitar and walked back to center stage. He adjusted his microphone and looked out at the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I think we all just learned something important tonight. Now let's finish this show the right way." He started playing "Can't Help Falling in Love" again, from the beginning. But this time it sounded different. It sounded deeper, more meaningful, like he was singing it not about romantic love, but about all the kinds of love that matter. The love between parents and children. The love that survives misunderstandings and mistakes. The love that's real and messy and worth fighting for. As Elvis sang, cameras in the audience captured something beautiful. Robert Mitchell with his arm around his daughter Sarah, both of them swaying gently to the music, both of them smiling through their tears. A father and daughter who had found their way back to each other on the stage of the Chicago Stadium in front of 20,000 witnesses. But then something unexpected happened. After the concert ended and the crowd filed out, Robert and Sarah were approached by dozens of families, parents who wanted to share their own struggles with their teenage children, teenagers who wanted to tell their parents they were sorry. The lobby of the Chicago Stadium turned into an impromptu counseling session as families who had been brought together by Elvis's words shared their stories and supported each other. The incident made headlines across the country. Not sensational headlines about a crazy fan disrupting a concert, but thoughtful stories about a father's desperate love and a singer's wisdom. Newspapers ran editorials about the generation gap, about understanding between parents and children, about how, even in the middle of a rock and roll concert, real human connection could break through. For Elvis, the night became one of the most meaningful performances of his career. He'd given thousands of concerts, sung millions of notes, moved countless crowds. But this was different. This was the night he helped heal a family. Robert Mitchell later gave an interview to a Chicago newspaper about what happened that night. "I went to that concert thinking Elvis Presley was the enemy," Robert said. "I went there angry, ready to confront the man I blamed for losing my daughter. But what I found was someone who understood both of us. Someone who saw the pain we were both in and knew how to bridge that gap. He didn't take sides. He didn't defend himself. He just helped us see each other." Sarah Mitchell, in the same interview, had her own perspective. "I was so embarrassed when my dad jumped on stage," she admitted. "I thought my life was over. But then Elvis said things that my dad had been trying to tell me for months, and suddenly, I could hear it. Sometimes you need someone outside your family to say the truth before you can really listen. Elvis did that for us. He saved my relationship with my father. But there was one more twist coming. True to her promise to Elvis, Sarah stayed in school. She graduated near the top of her class in 1974. She went to college, got a degree in education, and became a high school guidance counselor. Her entire career was built around helping parents and teenagers communicate with each other, bridge the gaps that had almost destroyed her own family. "That night at the Chicago Stadium changed my life," Sarah said in an interview on the 40th anniversary of the concert. "Elvis showed me that you can dream big and still be responsible, that you can love music and art and beautiful things while still honoring the people who love you. He taught me that growing up doesn't mean giving up your dreams. It means building a strong enough foundation to actually achieve them." Robert Mitchell remained close with his daughter for the rest of his life. He passed away in 2003, and at his funeral, Sarah played a recording of "Can't Help Falling in Love," the song that had been playing when their healing began. For Elvis, the Chicago Stadium incident reinforced something he'd always believed, but perhaps hadn't fully understood until that night. His role as a performer extended beyond entertainment. He had a platform, a voice, and an opportunity to touch people's lives in ways that went deeper than any song. After that night, Elvis started paying more attention to the audience, said Joe Esposito, Elvis's longtime friend and road manager. He'd always been generous with fans, but now he was looking for opportunities to really connect, to see the people behind the screaming, to understand what they were going through. Elvis began incorporating more between-song patter into his shows, telling stories, offering life advice, using his platform to speak directly to the challenges his fans were facing. He talked about his mother, about the importance of family, about staying grounded even as you chase your dreams. But Elvis saw something no one else noticed. In that moment with Robert Mitchell, Elvis recognized something of himself. The desperate father trying to hold on to his daughter was like Elvis's own mother, Gladys, who had worried constantly that fame would destroy her boy. The teenage girl pulling away from her father was like young Elvis himself, desperate to break free from Tupelo and become something bigger. Elvis saw both sides because he'd lived both sides, and that understanding allowed him to bridge a gap that seemed unbridgeable. The bootleg recording of that night at the Chicago Stadium became one of the most treasured Elvis recordings among collectors, not for the music quality, but for the raw human drama captured on tape. The anger in Robert's voice, the embarrassment in Sarah's, the wisdom and compassion in Elvis's, and the sound of 20,000 people witnessing a moment of authentic human connection in the middle of a rock and roll concert. Today, there's a photograph that hangs in Sarah Mitchell Thompson's office at the high school, where she still works as a guidance counselor. It's a grainy shot taken from the audience at the Chicago Stadium in 1972. In it, you can see Elvis standing between Robert and Sarah Mitchell, his hand on each of their shoulders, bringing them together. Underneath the photo is a small brass plaque that reads, October 14, 1972, the night Elvis saved my family. What he did next became legend. Elvis's handling of the Robert Mitchell incident became a case study in conflict resolution, taught in communication classes and psychology courses. It demonstrated how to de-escalate a volatile situation through empathy, how to find common ground between opposing sides, how to use platform and influence for something beyond self-interest. Elvis could have had that man arrested, noted Dr. Patricia Collins, a family therapist who wrote a paper about the incident. He could have humiliated him, defended himself, or simply had security remove him. Instead, he chose to understand. He chose to help. And in doing so, he showed that real strength isn't about defending your ego. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable and the wisdom to see beyond the surface. The story of Elvis and Robert Mitchell reminds us that behind every act of apparent aggression or anger is often a person in pain. A parent who's scared, a child who's lost, someone who's desperately trying to protect what they love and doesn't know how. Elvis stopped his concert that night in Chicago. He could have ignored Robert's outburst, could have let security handle it, could have protected his show and his image. Instead, he chose to stop everything and help a family heal. He chose compassion over convenience. He chose understanding over self-protection. And in doing so, he gave 20,000 people something more valuable than entertainment. He gave them a reminder that we're all struggling with the same basic human challenges, that we all love people we're afraid of losing, that we all feel misunderstood sometimes, and that with a little wisdom, a little compassion, and a lot of courage, we can bridge even the widest gaps between hearts. But the story didn't end there. 40 years later, in 2012, Sarah Mitchell Thompson organized a special event at her high school. She invited parents and teenagers who were struggling to communicate, who felt the same gaps that had almost destroyed her relationship with her father. She called it the Elvis Project, and it used music, storytelling, and facilitated conversations to help families reconnect. The program was so successful that it spread to other schools. Today, the Elvis Project operates in over 200 schools across America, helping thousands of families bridge the generation gap. Every session ends the same way, with everyone listening to Can't Help Falling in Love together, parents with their arms around their children, remembering that love is the foundation everything else is built on. My dad stormed Elvis's stage because he loved me, Sarah said at the program's 10th anniversary. Elvis stopped his concert because he understood love. And now, I spend my life helping other families find their way back to each other. That's the legacy of that night in Chicago. Not just a moment of healing for one family, but a reminder to all of us that love is always worth fighting for. The night Elvis stopped his concert for an angry father became more than just a memorable show. It became a testament to the power of empathy, the importance of family, and the truth that sometimes the most important thing a performer can do is stop performing and start being human. Robert Mitchell came to Elvis's stage looking for a fight and found healing instead. Sarah Mitchell came to that concert looking for an escape and found a reason to stay. And 20,000 people came looking for entertainment and witnessed something that changed how they thought about love, family, and what really matters. That's the power of choosing compassion over conflict. That's the power of seeing people in their pain and helping them find their way back to each other. That's the power of being more than just a performer, of being a human being who understands that fame and talent mean nothing if you don't use them to make the world a little bit better, one broken family at a time. Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, but on October 14th, 1972, he was something even more important. He was a healer, a mediator, a wise voice reminding us all that the love between parent and child is worth more than any concert, any fame, or any dream. And that's a lesson worth remembering long after the music fades.